The keys to that SUV sat in my palm for exactly 9 days before my mother slipped them off my dresser and dropped them into the hand of my younger sister like she was passing along a hand-me-down sweater. 9 days. That is how long I owned the most generous gift anyone had ever given me before it disappeared from my driveway and reappeared in hers, parked under a string of fairy lights she had bought to celebrate her new ride. My name is Marlo Vance. I am 34 years old, and I live in a small brick townhouse in Asheville, North Carolina. I work as a pediatric occupational therapist at a clinic that serves families who cannot always afford the help their children need, which means my paychecks are steady, but never extravagant. I drive a 15-year-old sedan with a cracked dashboard and a passenger window that only rolls down halfway. I had driven that same car since I was a senior in college, and I had made peace with the rattle in the engine and the duct tape on the side mirror because peace, I had learned, was cheaper than ambition in a family like mine. The SUV was a gift from my grandmother, Coraline Vance, who everyone in our family simply called Gran. She had turned 82 that spring, and she had decided, in the quiet, stubborn way she decided everything, that she was tired of watching me drive a car that sounded like a coffee grinder full of pebbles. She had called me on a Tuesday in early June of 2025 and told me to clear my Saturday afternoon. She did not say why. She just said, "Wear something nice and bring your appetite, because we are going somewhere together, and afterward I am taking you to that Italian place you love near the river." I should mention that my 24th birthday had passed a full decade ago. Gran had a habit of mixing up the numbers when she got excited, and when she finally handed me the key fob in the parking lot of a dealership in South Asheville, she laughed at herself and said, "Well, I missed your 24th and your 28th and probably a few in between, so consider this a catch-up for every birthday I ever forgot." She had been saving for years. She told me that part later, almost as an apology, like she was embarrassed it had taken her so long to be able to do something this big for me. The SUV was a deep midnight blue, a midsize crossover with heated seats and a sunroof and a backup camera that beeped politely when I got too close to a curb. It still smelled like the showroom, that sharp, clean scent of new leather and plastic film. I cried in the driver's seat before I even pulled out of the lot. Gran sat in the passenger side with her purse on her lap and patted my knee and told me that a woman who spends her days lifting up other people deserves to be lifted up too, every once in a while. I drove her home that evening with the windows cracked and the radio playing a soft country station she liked. She held a leftover container of tiramisu on her lap and hummed along to a song about a daughter and a porch swing. When I dropped her off at the assisted living community where she had moved 2 years earlier, she squeezed my hand at the door and said, "Promise me you will enjoy it, Marlo. Promise me you will not let anyone make you feel guilty for having one nice thing." I promised. I meant it. I drove home that night with the windows down and the air smelling like rain on warm pavement, and for the first time in years, I felt like something in my life had finally gone right without a catch. The catch arrived 4 days later, on a Wednesday afternoon, when my mother let herself into my townhouse with the spare key I had given her for emergencies. I was at the clinic. I came home to find her sitting at my kitchen table with a glass of my iced tea and a stack of mail she had sorted into piles like she was running a small post office out of my dining room. My mother is named Delphine Vance. She is 63 years old, and she has the kind of smile that can make a stranger trust her in under a minute. She has been using that smile on me my entire life. She told me that my sister Britton had been having a rough month. Britton is 29, 3 years younger than the gap between me and her really suggests, because emotionally, she has always seemed about 17 and treated like she was about 7. My mother said Britton had been crying about her car, a leased compact that she had let lapse on payments, and that the dealership was threatening to repossess it. She said it would crush Britton to lose her car right before her engagement party, which was happening in late July. She said it with that smile, the trusting one, the one that made my stomach tight without me knowing why. I said I was sorry to hear that. I said I hoped Britton figured it out. I poured myself a glass of water and waited for the other shoe, because there is always another shoe with my mother, and I had been catching shoes for 34 years. She said, "You know, Marlo, you really do not need that big SUV. You live alone. You have no children. You drive 10 minutes to work. Britton has the engagement, the wedding planning, all those vendor appointments, and she will be a mother someday soon. It just makes more sense. I set the glass down very carefully on the counter. I told her that the SUV was a gift from Gran. I told her that Gran had saved for years to give it to me. I told her that it was not a family vehicle to be redistributed based on whose life looked the busiest on a given Wednesday. I said all of that with my voice steady, because I had learned long ago that raising my voice in front of my mother was like handing her ammunition. She tilted her head. She told me I was being selfish. She said Gran was old and would not even remember which one of us she had given it to by Christmas. She said that real sisters share. She said that one day, when I was a mother, I would understand what it meant to want something better for your child than what you had for yourself. She said it like I was already failing some test I had not signed up to take. I told her no. I told her no twice, in case she had missed it the first time. I asked her to leave my mail alone and to drink her tea somewhere else, because I had paperwork to catch up on and I did not have the energy to keep having this conversation. She kissed my cheek on her way out. She told me she loved me. She told me to think about it. I did think about it. I thought about it for 4 more days. I thought about it while I drove the SUV to work and felt the smooth, quiet hum of the engine. I thought about it while I parked it in my driveway and looked at it through my kitchen window like it was a sleeping animal I was afraid would wander off. I thought about it while my father called me twice and left 2 voicemails about how disappointed he was that I was making this difficult. My father is Reeves Vance. He is 65. He has spent his entire adult life making my mother happy and treating that as his only real job, and he was very good at it. In the same way, some men are very good at avoiding the hard parts of being a parent by pretending the hard parts are not their department. On the 9th day, I came home from a long shift to find my driveway empty. My stomach dropped before my brain caught up. I ran inside, half convinced the car had been stolen, before I noticed the small white envelope sitting on my kitchen counter with my name written across it in my mother's looping handwriting. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of notebook paper. It said, "We did what was best for the family. Do not make a scene at the party. Love, Mom." That was how I learned that my SUV was no longer mine. That was how I learned that a gift, in my family, was only ever alone. And that was the moment I stopped being the daughter who caught shoes and started being the daughter who finally threw one back. I sat at my kitchen counter for a long time that night with the note in my hand and the lights off. The street lamp outside threw a yellow stripe across the floor, and I watched it tremble whenever a car passed on the road. I kept waiting to feel the familiar heat of shame climb up my neck, the one that always told me I had overreacted, that I should call my mother and apologize, that I should let this go because letting things go was easier than the alternative. The heat did not come. What came instead was a slow, cold clarity, like someone had opened a window in a room I had been sealed inside for years. I picked up my phone. I almost called Gran first. I stopped myself. Gran had a heart condition the doctors had been monitoring for 2 years, and the last thing I wanted was for her to hear this news from me in the middle of the night with no one beside her. I put the phone down and I made myself a cup of tea instead, and I sat there until almost 3 in the morning, going through every birthday and every Christmas and every quiet, ordinary moment in my life where I had been asked to give something up for Britton. There was the bicycle. I had been 10, she had been 5, and my purple bicycle with the white basket had become hers because she had thrown a tantrum in the front yard, and my mother had told me that bigger sisters share. There was the laptop I had saved for in high school, the one I had bought with money from a summer of bagging groceries, which became the family laptop within a week because Britton had a school project, and my mother said it was selfish to keep technology locked up in my bedroom. There was the small inheritance from my grandfather when I was 21, which my mother had asked to borrow and never paid back. Money that had been meant for graduate school and instead became a down payment on a hot tub for the back deck of my parents. There was Connor. I will get to Connor later, but the short version is that Britton had taken him too, in her own way, and my mother had smiled the same smile through that one. I had spent 34 years of my life being told that love meant handing over the things I loved. I had spent 34 years confusing exhaustion for generosity. And the SUV, the stupid, beautiful midnight blue SUV with the heated seats, was apparently the line I had not known I was drawing until somebody crossed it. I did not sleep. At 7 in the morning, I called my best friend Imani Wexler, who had been my best friend since our junior year of college and who had watched my family from the sidelines for over a decade with the patient horror of a woman observing a slow-motion car accident. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Marlo, I love you, and I need you to listen to me very carefully. Do not call your mother. Do not call your father. Do not call Brits. Call a lawyer." I laughed because I thought she was joking. She was not joking. She told me that her cousin Adiz was an attorney in Charlotte who handled exactly these kinds of family property disputes, and that she would text me her number within the hour. She said, "You have proof that car was a gift to you specifically. You have the paperwork, you have witnesses. You have your grandmother. Do not let them rewrite this story." I went to work that day on autopilot. I helped a 4-year-old boy named Sammy practice gripping a crayon. I helped a 7-year-old girl named Priya work on her balance with a foam wedge. I smiled at parents in the waiting room and made small talk about the weather. I did not cry until I was sitting in my car at lunchtime, my old car, the one with the duct tape, which I had pulled out of my garage that morning because I no longer had a choice. Imani came over that night with takeout from the Thai place on Merriman Avenue and a bottle of wine. She made me eat half the pad see ew before she let me talk. Then she made me write everything down, every detail. The date Gran had taken me to the dealership. The name of the salesman. The amount Gran had paid, which I knew because she had told me proudly that she had saved $38,000 over the better part of a decade. The fact that the title and registration were in my name. The text messages from my mother in the days before the keys disappeared. The note on the counter. I called Adiz the next morning. She listened without interrupting for almost 20 minutes. When I was finished, she said, "Marlo, this is theft. I do not want to dress it up in softer language for you. If the title is in your name and your sister is driving that vehicle without your permission, this is theft. The fact that you are related to the thieves does not change what it is. It only changes how messy it will be to fix." I asked her what I should do. She told me not to confront anyone yet. She told me to gather every piece of paperwork I had, to take photographs of any text messages, to write down a timeline of events, and to come see her in Charlotte the following Tuesday. She also told me one more thing, and this is the part that made me sit down on the floor of my hallway with the phone pressed to my ear. She said, "Do not let them know you are talking to a lawyer. Let them think you are processing it. Let them get comfortable. People who are comfortable get sloppy. People who are sloppy give you evidence." I drove to Charlotte that Tuesday in my old sedan. The drive took 2.5 hours, and the air conditioning gave out somewhere around Hickory. So I rolled down the windows and let the wind dry the sweat off my forehead and tried not to think about the fact that I had owned a vehicle with working climate control for 9 days of my life. Adiz was tall, calm, and direct. Her office was on the 17th floor of a building downtown, and she had a small jade plant on her windowsill that she watered while she talked to me. She walked me through my options. She told me that I had a strong civil case. She told me that I also had a strong criminal case if I wanted to pursue it, but that most clients in family situations chose civil because they wanted their car back, not a relative in jail. She told me that the cleanest path forward was a formal demand letter, followed by a civil claim if the demand letter was ignored. I sat in her office and tried to imagine my mother opening a letter from a law firm. I tried to imagine my father reading it over her shoulder. I tried to imagine Britton, who had once cried because I would not let her wear my prom dress to her sophomore homecoming, learning that she would have to give the SUV back. I did not feel guilty. That surprised me more than anything else. For the first time in my life, when I imagined my family being uncomfortable because of a decision I made, I did not feel the urge to take it back. I told Adiz to send the letter. She told me to wait. She told me there was one more thing I needed to do first, and that was tell my grandmother. Not because Gran was the legal owner anymore, but because Gran deserved to hear it from me before she heard it from anyone else. And because, Adiz said, with a small careful smile, sometimes the most powerful witness in a family case is the person nobody thought to ask. I drove back to Asheville with the windows down and a plan in my head and a different kind of weight on my chest. Not the heavy guilt I had carried for so long. Something lighter and sharper. Something that felt almost like hope. Gran lived at a place called Magnolia Ridge, a single-story assisted living community on the west side of town with wide hallways and a courtyard full of rose bushes that the residents took turns deadheading on Sunday afternoons. Her apartment was the third door on the left in the south wing, and she had hung a wreath of dried lavender on the front of it because she said the smell reminded her of her mother. I stopped by on Wednesday after work with a bag of the lemon cookies she liked from the bakery on Charlotte Street and a knot in my stomach the size of a fist. She opened the door in her usual outfit, a pair of soft gray slacks and a cardigan the color of butter, and she beamed at me the way she always did, like I was the only person who had ever bothered to visit her, even though I knew for a fact that my cousin Dorian came every Sunday and her old friend Bernice came every other Friday. She hugged me at the door. She smelled like rose water and bread. I made us tea. I sat across from her in the small living room with the cookies on a plate between us, and I watched her dunk one into her mug and bite the soft end off and close her eyes the way she did when something tasted exactly the way she had hoped it would. I almost did not tell her. I almost let her have one more afternoon of believing the gift she had given me was still mine. Then she looked up at me and said, "Marlo, honey, you are quiet today. What is wrong?" I told her all of it. I told her about my mother sitting at my kitchen table, about the note on the counter, about the empty driveway, about the lawyer in Charlotte, about the photographs of the SUV I had seen on Britain on social media, parked at a vineyard in the mountains with a caption that read, "Finally driving something that matches the vibe." I watched my grandmother set her mug down on the coffee table very slowly, like she was afraid she might break it. She did not speak for almost a full minute. She just looked at me. Her eyes, which had been such a soft pale blue my whole life, seemed to sharpen, like someone had turned a knob and brought the world into clearer focus behind them. She said, "Your mother took the keys off your dresser." I said yes. She said, "Your father knew." I said yes. She said, "Your sister is driving it right now." I said yes. She picked up her tea again. Her hand did not shake. That was the part that struck me most. Gran had a tremor in her right hand that had been getting worse for the past year, a small one, nothing serious, but enough that she always held her cup with two hands. In that moment, with the weight of what I had just told her settling into the room, her hand was perfectly still. She said, "Marlo, look at me. I want you to listen very carefully. I want to make sure I understand what I am hearing. You are telling me that the vehicle I purchased with my own money, the one I gave to you in front of a dealership full of witnesses, the one I signed paperwork for as a gift to my granddaughter, has been taken from you by my own daughter and given to my other granddaughter, and that they did not ask you. They did not ask me. They simply took it." I said yes. Gran sat back in her chair. She closed her eyes. I watched her chest rise and fall under the soft yellow cardigan. I almost reached for her hand. I was scared in that moment that this would be too much for her heart. The doctors had been very clear about stress. The doctors had been very clear about a lot of things. When she opened her eyes again, she did not look upset. She looked something else, something I had never seen on her face before. She looked decided. She said, "Your grandfather always told me that the worst mistake a parent can make is to love one child more than the others, because the favored child grows up small and the forgotten child grows up alone, and both of them grow up wrong. I have watched your mother do exactly that to you and your sister for almost 30 years. I have bit my tongue more times than I can count. I told myself it was not my place. I told myself that you were grown and that you would set your own boundaries when you were ready. I was wrong, Marlo. I was wrong to wait this long." She told me then about her own mother, my great-grandmother, a woman named Verbena who had lived through the Great Depression and had raised 4 daughters in a 2-bedroom house in eastern Tennessee. Gran said that her own mother had had a saying, which was that a gift given is a gift owned, and that anyone who tries to take a gift back or take a gift away from the person it was given to is not a relative. They are a thief in family clothing. Gran said she had not thought about that saying in 50 years. She said she was thinking about it now. She asked me what the lawyer had said. I told her. She nodded slowly through the whole explanation. When I got to the part about the demand letter, she stopped me. She said, "Before you send anything, I want to come with you the next time you meet with that lawyer. I want to be on record. I want my name on something that says, in clear language, that this vehicle was a gift to Marlo Vance and to no one else. I want there to be no question, in any court or any family meeting or any conversation that happens after I am gone, about what I intended. I told her she did not have to do that. I told her I did not want her to be dragged into this. I told her that I could handle it. She reached across the coffee table and took my hand. Her skin was warm and soft and dry, the way a grandmother's hand should be. She said, "Marlo, sweetheart, I am 82 years old. I have been alive long enough to know that some fights are not yours alone to handle. This is one of them." We sat together for a long time after that. We did not talk much. She finished her tea. I finished mine. We ate the rest of the lemon cookies and watched the late afternoon light move across the wall behind her armchair. Before I left, she walked me to the door, and she stopped me with one hand on my arm. She said, "There is one more thing I want you to know. The party your sister is having on July 26th, the engagement party." I said yes. She said, "I am coming. I had been planning to send my regrets because the doctors have been telling me to slow down, and I did not feel like sitting through 3 hours of your mother performing for her friends. But I am coming now. I want to be there. I want to see this with my own eyes." I asked her what she meant. She smiled at me, and it was not the warm, gentle smile I had grown up with. It was something older, something with iron in it. She said, "Your mother thinks she has won something. I want to be in the room when she finds out she is not." I drove home in my old sedan with the broken air conditioning and the duct-taped mirror, and for the first time since the keys had disappeared, I did not feel small. I felt like someone had finally, after 34 years, opened a door I had not even known was locked. The next 2 weeks moved faster than I expected. Adiz drafted the demand letter, but on my request, and on the advice of Gran, she did not send it yet. We agreed to hold it until after the engagement party. Gran said she wanted to see the family in one room before any formal action was taken, not because she was hoping for a reconciliation, but because she wanted everyone to look her in the eye while she still had the chance to look back. In the meantime, I went about my life as if nothing had happened. That was the hardest part. My mother called twice that week, both times in her sweet voice, asking if I needed anything for the party, if I was bringing a +1, if I had decided what to wear. I answered her in short, polite sentences. I said I would be there. I said I was bringing a mani. I said I had a dress already. She seemed relieved. She seemed to think she had gotten away with it. At one point she even said, "I am so glad you have come around, Marlo. I knew you would. You have always been the mature one." That last sentence almost made me laugh out loud, because the mature one is what she had always called me right before she asked me to give something up. The mature one is what she had called me when she handed Britton my bicycle. The mature one is what she had called me when she asked me to step aside for Connor. Connor Halliburton had been my boyfriend during my second year of graduate school. We had met in a coffee shop on a rainy October afternoon. He was a tall, quiet engineer with kind eyes and a habit of bringing me soup when I was studying late. We dated for 1.5 years. I thought for a while that he was the person I would marry. I brought him home for Thanksgiving in the fall of 2016, and my mother charmed him over green bean casserole, and Britton, who was 20 at the time, sat across the table and watched him like he was a slice of cake she had not been offered. Within 6 months, Connor had stopped texting me back. Within 8 months, he was at a bar in downtown Asheville with my sister, her hand on his forearm. Within a year, they were engaged. The engagement broke off 6 months after that, when Connor finally realized what kind of person he had chosen, but by then I had already learned my lesson. I had already moved out of my parents' house and rented my first apartment and started building a life with locks on the doors. My mother had told me, when I cried about Connor, that I was being dramatic, that Britton had not done anything wrong, that if he had really loved me, he would not have been so easy to take. That phrase had stayed with me for almost a decade. So easy to take. Like everything I had ever owned, including my own boyfriend, had been a loose item on a shelf that anyone in my family could reach for at any time. I thought about Connor a lot during those 2 weeks, not because I missed him. I had not missed him in years, and the fiancé Britton was now celebrating, a man named Tate Beaumont who worked in commercial real estate, was a completely different kind of person from Connor. Tate was loud where Connor had been quiet, polished where Connor had been rumpled. I thought about Connor because that situation had been the first time I had seen, with absolute clarity, that my mother would always choose Britain, no matter the cost to me. The SUV was not a new betrayal. It was just the loudest one. I told Manny all of this over dinner one Sunday. She listened and then said, "Marlo, I want you to think about something. You have been the family ATM, the family backup plan, the family scapegoat, and the family practice round for your sister for your entire life. What happens if you stop? What happens if you just stop completely? Not in a dramatic way, not with a big speech. Just stop. Stop answering the calls that drain you. Stop volunteering for the holidays. Stop being available." I told her I did not know what would happen. I told her I had never tried. She said, "Maybe it is time to find out." I started small. I stopped answering my mother every time she called. I let calls go to voicemail and returned them on my own schedule, sometimes a day later, sometimes two. I did not explain. I did not apologize. When she sent passive-aggressive texts, I read them and put my phone face down on the counter. When my father called to scold me for ignoring her, I told him I was busy with work and I would call when I had time. It was harder than I had expected. There is a particular kind of muscle memory you build when you have been trained from childhood to be available. The phone would ring, and my hand would reach for it before my brain caught up. I had to physically put the phone in another room some evenings. I had to remind myself that nothing bad would happen if I did not answer. Nobody was bleeding. Nobody was dying. My mother just wanted to talk about flower arrangements, or to complain about the caterer, or to ask whether I had any opinions on the seating chart. She did not need me. She just needed an audience. In the second week, I went with Gran to Charlotte. Adiz took her statement on a Tuesday morning in a small conference room with a notary present and a recording device on the table. Gran was poised and clear. She spoke for almost 40 minutes without losing her place. She described the years of saving. She described the day at the dealership. She described the conversation in the parking lot where she had told me that this was my car, mine alone, a gift from her to me, not to be shared, not to be transferred, not to be reassigned. She described, with painful precision, the moment I had called her to tell her what had happened. When she was finished, Adiz thanked her and told her she had done beautifully. Gran waved that off. She said, "I have been waiting 50 years to say something like that out loud about my own daughter." It was not difficult, it was overdue. On the drive home, Gran asked me about the dress I was wearing to the party. I told her it was a simple navy wrap dress I had bought 2 years ago for a wedding. She said, "Marlo, no, we are stopping. We are getting you something new." She made me pull off the highway in Hickory. She marched me into a boutique in a little shopping plaza and made me try on 3 different dresses while she sat in a velvet chair and watched. The one she picked was a deep emerald green, knee-length, with cap sleeves and a soft satin belt that tied at the waist. She said, "This one. You will wear this one. You will walk into that party with your back straight and your chin up. I want everyone in the room to see you." I tried to pay. She slapped my hand away and put down her own card. She said, "You have given enough, Marlo. Let someone give to you for once." I cried in the dressing room. Quietly, so she would not hear. Then I came out and let her zip me up, and I let her tell me I looked like someone who finally knew what she was worth, and I let myself believe her. The night before the party, I laid the dress out on my bed, and I stood looking at it for a long time. The emerald green looked almost black in the lamplight. I thought about my mother. I thought about Brit. I thought about the SUV sitting in a driveway across town with fairy lights wrapped around the bumper. I thought tomorrow. And for the first time in my life, I went to sleep looking forward to a family event. The engagement party was held at my parents' house, a sprawling 4-bedroom on a half-acre lot in a neighborhood called Beaver Lake, where the lawns were green even in August, and every mailbox had a name painted on it in fancy script. My father had spent $2,000 on a tent rental for the backyard, and my mother had hired a small jazz trio to play under the string lights they had hung between the trees. There were 60 guests on the invitation list. There was a custom cake with the names Britton and Tate piped in gold across the top tier. There was a champagne fountain on the back deck. I drove over with Manny in her car because my old sedan with its broken air and its duct tape was not going to be a guest at this particular gathering. Imani wore a black jumpsuit and silver hoops, and she squeezed my hand at every red light on the way over. She said, "No matter what happens tonight, I am here." She said, "You do not have to do anything you do not want to do." She said, "If you need to leave, we leave. No questions." I told her I was not leaving. I told her I had been leaving in small ways my whole life, and tonight I was going to stay. We arrived at 6:30. The driveway was full of cars. The midnight blue SUV was parked at the front of the line, closest to the house, with a small bow still tied to the side mirror, like Britton had wanted to remind every guest as they walked in that this was her latest acquisition. I looked at it for a long time as we walked past. The bow was white satin. It was a bow I had not put there. Gran was already inside when we arrived. She was sitting in the formal living room in a wingback chair, wearing a dark plum dress with a pearl brooch at the collar, her cane resting against the armrest. My cousin Dorian was sitting on the ottoman beside her, holding her hand. Dorian is the son of my Uncle Pell, my mother's younger brother, and he is 37, and he is the kind of person who notices when the elderly woman in the room has not been offered water. He is also one of the few people in my extended family I genuinely trust. When Gran saw me, her whole face lit up. She held out her free hand and said, "Marlo, come here. Let me see you." I crossed the room and let her take my hand and pull me into the kind of hug only a grandmother can give, the kind that smells like rose water and feels like home. She held me at arm's length and looked me up and down in the emerald dress and said, "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." My mother appeared in the doorway then, wearing a cream-colored cocktail dress and a pair of pearl earrings I recognized as Gran old ones, the ones Gran had given her for her 40th birthday almost 25 years ago. She smiled at me with her practiced smile and crossed the room with her arms open. "Marlo, sweetheart," she said. "I am so glad you came. You look lovely." I let her hug me. I did not hug her back, not really. I let my arms rest at my sides, and I felt her squeeze me and pull away, and I watched her face when she registered that I had not returned the embrace. Something flickered across her expression. She covered it quickly. She turned to Imani and greeted her too, and she launched into a story about how busy the day had been and how the caterer had almost forgotten the vegetarian option. Gran watched all of this from her chair. She did not say anything. She just watched. The party moved out to the backyard around 7. Britton made her entrance with Tate on her arm. She was wearing a white sundress, which I thought was a bold choice for an engagement party, but Britton had always believed in early bridal energy. She made the rounds. She accepted compliments. She held up her left hand to show off the ring, a round diamond on a thin gold band, and she said the word fiancé about 40 times in the first 20 minutes. She came over to me and Imani about 30 minutes into the party. She had a glass of champagne in her hand and a look on her face that I had seen before, the look that said she was about to perform graciousness for an audience. She said, "Marlo, I am so glad you came. I really wanted you here." She said it loudly enough for the cluster of guests nearby to hear. I said thank you for the invitation, in a polite voice, in a voice that revealed nothing. She said, "Listen, I know things have been weird. I just want you to know that I really appreciate the car. It means so much. I am going to take such good care of it. Mom said you understood." The guests nearby had gone quiet. I felt Imani stiffen beside me. I smiled. I said, "Did she?" Britton blinked. I think she had expected me to be either angry or fawning, and she had not been prepared for the third option, which was bored. She said, "Well, yes, she said you were on board." I said, "Britton, this is your engagement party. I am not going to ruin it for you. We can talk about the car another time." Her face changed. The graciousness slipped for just a second. She said, "There is nothing to talk about. The car is mine now." Imani made a small sound beside me, like she had bitten her tongue. I did not respond. I just looked at Britton, and I let her see that I had heard her, and then I turned and walked toward the bar that had been set up at the edge of the tent, leaving her standing there with her champagne flute halfway to her mouth. I think that was the moment she realized something had shifted. She had expected me to argue. She had expected me to plead. I had done neither. I had simply walked away. The party continued. The jazz trio played. The sun set behind the trees. Tate gave a sweet speech about how lucky he was, and my father gave a longer speech about family being the most important thing, a phrase he repeated 3 times, like saying it more often would make it more true. Gran sat in a wicker chair near the edge of the tent. She did not give a speech. She did not eat much. She held her cane across her lap and she watched. She watched my mother flit around between groups of guests. She watched my father shake hands and pat shoulders. She watched Britton pose for photos with her left hand prominently displayed. She watched the SUV gleaming in the driveway through the gap between the house and the garage. Around 8:45, there was a small lull in the music. People were eating cake. The conversation had spread out across the yard in soft pockets. I was standing near the back deck with a Manny, sipping a glass of sparkling water, when I saw Gran rise from her wicker chair. She did not look like an 82-year-old woman with a heart condition in that moment. She looked like a woman with somewhere to be. She walked across the yard slowly, leaning on her cane but with her shoulders back. She walked past the cake table. She walked past the jazz trio. She walked up to the small wooden platform my father had set up earlier so that he and my mother could give their toast. She climbed the 2 steps onto the platform with effort, and she picked up the small handheld microphone my father had left there. The conversation in the yard began to fade. Heads turned. Guests nudged each other. My mother, who had been holding court near the dessert table, froze with a slice of cake halfway lifted toward her plate. My father, near the bar, set his drink down. Britton, in her white sundress, stopped mid-sentence with a guest from her sorority. Gran tapped the microphone twice with one finger. The sound carried across the yard like a small drum. She said, "Good evening, everyone. Most of you know me. For the ones who do not, I am Coraline Vance. I am the grandmother of the bride-to-be, and I am the grandmother of her older sister, Marlo, who you may have noticed has been quiet tonight. I would like to take just a few minutes of your time before the cake is finished." The yard went silent. The jazz trio set down their instruments. I could hear the cicadas in the trees behind the house. I could hear my mother breathing. Gran smiled. It was a soft smile. It was the smile of a woman who had been waiting 50 years. She said, "I have a story to tell." The microphone trembled slightly in the hand of Gran, but her voice did not. She let the silence stretch for one long moment before she began, and in that moment, I saw something I will never forget. I saw my mother slowly set down her plate of cake on the dessert table. I saw my father take one step forward, like he was about to interrupt, and then stop himself, because there is no socially acceptable way to interrupt an 82-year-old woman holding a microphone at a family party. I saw Britton turn to find me across the yard, and I saw the exact moment she realized she could not. Gran said, "When I was 19 years old, in the spring of 1962, I married a man named Wendell Vance in a small church in Sevierville, Tennessee. We did not have much. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment above a hardware store, and Wendell worked 2 jobs to put me through nursing school. We had 3 children together. The middle one is the mother of Britton and Marlo. Her name is Delphine, and she is sitting at the back of this yard right now, and she knows what I am about to say is true." I watched my mother freeze. Her face went very still. I had seen her wear a lot of expressions in my life, but I had never seen this one. It was not anger. It was something closer to fear. Gran continued. She said, "My husband, Wendell, passed away in 2015. He left behind a small estate. Nothing extravagant, just a house, a savings account, and some life insurance. I have lived on that money for the last 10 years, along with a modest pension. I have lived simply. I do not take vacations. I do not eat out except on Sundays. I have done this because I had a plan. I had 3 grandchildren I wanted to take care of in small ways over the years. My nephew Dorian, who is sitting near me, received a contribution from me for his wedding 2 years ago. He knows about it. He thanked me properly. My granddaughter Britton received a contribution from me for the down payment on her first apartment when she moved out of her parents' house at the age of 24. She also knows about it." She paused. She looked across the yard. She found me in the crowd, and she smiled at me, and then she looked back at the rest of the guests. She said, "My granddaughter Marlo is 34 years old, and until last month, I had never given her a single significant financial gift. Not because she did not deserve one. Marlo has been the most responsible, the most steady, the most quietly generous person in this family for her entire adult life. She works with disabled children for a living. She drives a car that should have been retired 6 years ago. She has never once asked me for $1. I had not given her anything substantial before now because, frankly, every time I tried, her mother would convince me that Marlo was fine, that Marlo did not need it, that the money would be better spent on Britton, who was going through some new crisis or another. I am ashamed to say I listened. For many years, I listened. The yard was so quiet I could hear the ice melting in the buckets on the bar table. I could hear Imani breathing next to me. I did not dare look at my mother. I kept my eyes on Gran. She said, in June of this year, I decided I was done listening. I took $38,000 out of my savings account, money I had been setting aside for years, and I took my granddaughter Marlo to a dealership in South Asheville, and I bought her a midnight blue sport utility vehicle. The title was put in her name. The registration was put in her name. I signed paperwork making it explicitly clear that this vehicle was a gift to her and to her alone. I told her, in the parking lot of that dealership, that she deserved one nice thing after a lifetime of doing without. She paused again. She turned her head toward my mother. She said, Delphine, would you like to tell these guests what you did 9 days after I gave that car to your daughter? There was a sound from somewhere in the crowd, a small intake of breath from one of the older women. I think it was Bernice of Gran. My mother did not move. Her mouth was slightly open. She looked, for a moment, like she might actually try to answer. Then she pressed her lips together. Gran said, I will tell them then. Delphine let herself into the home of my granddaughter Marlo with a spare key that had been given to her for emergencies. She removed the keys to the vehicle from the dresser of Marlo. She gave those keys to her younger daughter, Britton, who is standing in this yard right now, in a white sundress, celebrating an engagement. She left a note on the kitchen counter telling Marlo that the family had decided. She did not consult me. She did not consult Marlo. She decided, on her own, that a gift I had given to one of my grandchildren could be reassigned to the other, because she has spent 30 years believing that what belongs to Marlo automatically belongs to Britton, the moment Britton wants it. Somebody in the crowd said, oh my God, quietly, like they had not meant to say it out loud. Gran said, I want to be very clear with everyone here tonight. I am not telling you this to embarrass my daughter. I am telling you because secrets have a half-life in this family, and I am tired of them. I am 82 years old. I have a heart condition. I do not have unlimited Sundays left. I would like the rest of my Sundays to be honest ones. She turned then slowly, and she looked directly at Britton. She said, Britton, sweetheart, I have loved you since the day you were born. I will love you until the day I die. But the vehicle you have been driving for the past month is not yours. It has never been yours. It belongs to your sister. And tonight, before you cut your cake, you are going to do one of two things. You are going to walk into that house, get the keys, and hand them back to Marlo. Or you are going to receive a letter from a law firm in Charlotte on Monday morning, which will require you to do the same thing, with significantly more witnesses and significantly more paperwork. The microphone made a small popping sound as Gran lowered it. The cicadas in the trees seemed suddenly louder. Britton stood frozen near the dessert table. The flute of champagne in her hand tilted slightly, and a small splash spilled over the rim onto the white tablecloth. She did not seem to notice. She was staring at Gran with the expression of a child who has just been told that the rules she had counted on her whole life were not actually rules. My mother finally spoke. Her voice came out higher than usual, brittle around the edges. She said, Mama, this is not the place. We can discuss this privately. There is no need to humiliate your own family in front of our friends. Gran turned to her. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She said, Delphine, you humiliated this family the moment you taught your daughters that one of them was worth more than the other. I am simply finishing the conversation you started. My father took another step forward. He said, with the careful authority he reserved for situations he did not understand, Mama, please, let us go inside and talk. Gran said, Reeves, sit down. You have been quiet for 30 years. You can be quiet for 10 more minutes. He sat down. There was a folding chair behind him, and he sat down in it like his knees had given out, and somebody nearby coughed to cover the sound. Gran turned back to Britton. She said, Sweetheart, I am waiting. Britton did not move for what felt like a full minute. Her champagne flute continued to drip slowly onto the tablecloth. The diamond on her finger caught the light from the string bulbs overhead. She looked, in that moment, very young, and not in the way she had cultivated over the years. She looked like a child who had been caught with something she had taken off a higher shelf than she was supposed to reach. I watched her face cycle through 3 or 4 expressions. I watched her look at our mother, who would not meet her eyes. I watched her look at our father, who was sitting in the folding chair with his head down. I watched her look at Tate, her fiancé, who had been quietly elegant all evening, and who was now staring at her with an expression I could only describe as new information being received. Then she looked at me. For the first time in years, my sister actually looked at me, not past me, not through me, at me. She said, "Marlo." I did not say anything, I just looked back. She said, "Did you really call a lawyer?" I said, "Yes." She said, "On me?" I said, "On whoever was driving my car without my permission." She set the champagne flute down on the table. Her hand was shaking. She walked slowly across the yard toward the house. The guests parted for her like a small Red Sea. The jazz musicians stood near their instruments without picking them up. My father did not stand. My mother did not stand. Tate followed Britton with his eyes but did not move. Britton went inside through the back sliding door. She was gone for maybe 90 seconds. When she came back, she had the key fob in her hand. The little black plastic rectangle that I had held in my own palm exactly 9 days before my mother took it away. She walked across the yard toward me. The guests watched her come. Imani put a hand on the small of my back, gently, like she was reminding me that I was still standing on solid ground. Britton stopped in front of me. She held out the key fob. Her eyes were red, but she was not crying. She said, "I am sorry." I took the key fob from her hand. The plastic was warm from her palm. I closed my fingers around it. I said, "Thank you." She said, "Mom told me you said it was fine. She said you agreed." I said, "I know." She said, "I should have asked you." I said, "Yes, you should have." She did not say anything else. She just stood there. I think she was waiting for me to forgive her, in the way I had always forgiven her, immediately, automatically, like a reflex. She had been counting on that reflex her whole life. I think she was realizing, in real time, that the reflex was no longer there. I did not forgive her, not in that moment. I was not ready. I did not lie about it either. I just nodded at her, the kind of small nod that acknowledges someone is in front of you, and I put the key fob in the small clutch I was carrying, and I turned to Imani and I said, "Will you drive me home in a little while?" Imani said, "Of course." Britton walked back to the dessert table. She did not pick up her champagne flute. She stood there for a moment, then she turned and walked into the house, and we did not see her again that night. Tate stayed in the yard. I have to give him that. He did not chase after her, and he did not pretend nothing had happened. He walked over to where Gran was standing, and he leaned down and kissed her on the cheek and said something quiet in her ear that I could not hear. Then he walked over to me. He held out his hand. I shook it. He said, "I did not know. I want you to know that. I had no idea." I said, "I believe you." He said, "I am sorry." I said, "Thank you." He nodded. He walked back across the yard, and he picked up his suit jacket from the back of a chair, and he went into the house after my sister. The party did not really continue after that. The guests began to drift toward their cars in small, awkward clusters. A few of them stopped to say goodbye to Gran. A few of them squeezed my arm on the way out. Bernice of Gran stopped me near the back deck and said, "Your grandmother is the bravest woman I have ever known. You are too." I do not think she meant it as flattery. She said it like a small fact she wanted to leave with me. My mother stayed at the dessert table. She did not look at me. She did not look at Gran. She picked up a napkin and started folding it. Then she unfolded it. Then she folded it again. My father remained in the folding chair until almost everybody had left. Then he got up slowly and walked into the house without speaking to anyone. I helped Gran out of the yard and toward the front of the house. Dorian had her other arm. We loaded her carefully into Dorian's car, which he had volunteered to drive her home in. Before she got in, she turned to me, and she put one hand on each side of my face, the way she had done when I was a little girl, and she said, "Marlo, you did so well. You did so beautifully. I am so proud of you." I did not say anything. I could not. I just leaned my forehead against hers for a moment, and she patted my cheek, and she let Dorian help her into the car, and they drove off into the warm summer night. Imani drove me home in her car. We did not talk much on the drive. She put on a soft playlist she made for long drives. I sat in the passenger seat and watched the streetlights slide past and held the key fob in my hand and tried to understand what had just happened. When we got to my house, the midnight blue SUV was not there, of course. It was still in the driveway of my parents. We had agreed earlier in the week that I would not drive it home that night because I did not want to do that in front of the guests. I just wanted the keys back. I just wanted the ownership back. The car could come home in the morning. Imani came inside with me. We took off our heels at the door. She made me a cup of chamomile tea and put it in my hands, and we sat on the couch in the dim light from the kitchen, and she said, "How are you?" I said, "I do not know." She said, "That is fair." We sat for a long time. After a while I said, "Do you think she will hate me?" Imani said, "Who?" I said, "My mother." Imani said, "Marlo, your mother does not know how to hate the people she controls. She only knows how to hate the ones who leave. The question is not whether she will hate you. The question is whether you are willing to be hated, if that is what freedom costs." I sat with that for a long time. I drank the tea slowly. Eventually I said, "I think I am. I think I am." The next morning, Dorian drove me over to the house of my parents to retrieve the SUV. We arrived at 10 in the morning. The yard was a mess of folded chairs and dewy tablecloths and the remnants of the white tent, which the rental company would not be picking up until Monday. My father was in the driveway in a faded t-shirt and jeans, coiling extension cords. He looked older than he had the night before. He looked, for the first time in my memory, like the 65-year-old man he actually was. He looked up when we pulled in. He did not smile, he did not scowl either, he just looked tired. I got out of the car. Dorian stayed in his car. We had agreed he would wait. He had a book with him and a bottle of water and the kind of patience that comes from being raised by a kind father. I walked up to my dad. He set the extension cord down on the grass. He said, "Marlo." I said, "Hi, Dad." He looked at the SUV in the driveway. He said, "I am sorry." I said, "Are you?" He said, "Yes." I waited. I thought he might say something more. He did not. My father had never been good at the part of apologies that comes after the apology. He believed the word itself was enough. I said, "Dad, I am not going to fight with you today. I just came to get my car. But I want you to know something. I want you to know that I love you. And I want you to know that what you did, by going along with this, by letting Mom take the keys and not stopping her, hurt me more than what she did. Because I expected it from her. I have always expected it from her. I did not expect it from you." He looked at the ground. He said, "I know." I said, "That is not enough, Dad. I know is not enough. I am not asking you to grovel. I am just telling you that the next time something like this happens, and I think we both know there will be a next time, I need you to choose me. Not the loudest voice in the room. Me." He nodded slowly. He did not look up. I took the key fob out of my pocket. I unlocked the SUV. The familiar little chirp of the lights blinked once. I walked around to the driver's side, opened the door, and got in. The leather seat was cool. The dashboard was clean. There were a few new things on the console: a small bottle of perfume Britain had left behind, a pair of sunglasses with rhinestones on the temples, a phone charger that was not mine. I did not touch them. I left them right where they were. I started the engine. It hummed to life smoothly. I rolled down the window. I said, "Tell Mom I have her spare key. I will be mailing it back to her this week. After that, the only way into my house is the front door, and only when I invite her." He nodded. I backed out of the driveway. Dorian followed me in his car. We drove together to a small diner on the north side of town, where we had agreed to meet for breakfast, because Dorian had said, very wisely, that nobody should have to retrieve a stolen car and then drive home alone to an empty house. At the diner, I ordered scrambled eggs and toast and coffee. Dorian ordered a waffle. He talked to me about nothing in particular. He told me about a hiking trail he had recently done with his wife, Yana. He told me about a podcast he was listening to about ancient Rome. He told me about the new puppy he and Yana had adopted, a small scruffy terrier mix named Beans. I appreciated all of it. I appreciated him filling the silence with things that had nothing to do with my family. I appreciated him treating me, for the first hour of the rest of my life, like a person, not like a case study. Over the next week, things unfolded the way Adiz had predicted they would. My mother did not call me for 4 days. When she finally did, she did not apologize. She left a voicemail saying that she hoped I was satisfied with what I had done, that I had embarrassed the entire family at the most important event of the life of my sister, and that Britton had been in tears for 2 days. She said, "I hope you can live with that, Marlo." I listened to the voicemail once. I did not delete it. I did not call her back. Adiz had told me to keep every communication for the next several months in case anything escalated. I saved it to a folder on my phone called Documentation. There were already 5 other entries in the folder. Britton, surprisingly, did call me. She called on the Thursday after the party. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that was different from the message of our mother. She said, "Marlo, it is me. I do not expect you to call me back. I just wanted to say I have been thinking about a lot of things this week." Tate and I had a long talk after the party. He said some things I needed to hear. "I am not asking you to forgive me. I am just saying I am thinking, I love you." I listened to that one twice. I did not call her back either. Not because I did not want to, but because I was not ready, and I had learned, finally, that I was allowed to take time. Gran called me every evening that week just to check in. She told me about her day. She told me what the staff at Magnolia Ridge had served for dinner. She told me about a book she was reading, a memoir by a woman who had grown up in West Virginia. She did not push me to feel any particular way. She just stayed in contact, steady and warm, like a small bright lamp in the corner of a room. On Friday, 6 days after the party, Adiz sent the demand letter. It was a formal, short, polite document, addressed to Delphine Vance and Reeves Vance and Britton Vance, on the letterhead of the firm of Adiz. It stated, in clean legal language, that the vehicle in question was the property of Marlo Vance, that the transfer of the vehicle in late June had been done without the consent of Marlo Vance, and that Marlo Vance reserved all rights to pursue civil or criminal remedies should there be any further interference with the property. It also stated that Marlo Vance would be changing the locks on her townhouse and revoking access to her residence for all parties named. I had the locks changed on a Saturday morning. The locksmith was a friendly young man with a beard and a small dog he had brought in his van. He worked for about an hour. When he left, I stood in my hallway holding the new keys, and I felt something I had not felt in my own home in a very long time. I felt private. I felt like the doors closed when I closed them. That weekend, I drove the SUV up the Blue Ridge Parkway with a Manny in the passenger seat and the windows down and the sunroof open. We stopped at 3 different overlooks. We ate sandwiches at a picnic table near Craggy Gardens. We did not talk about my family the entire day. We talked about other things. We talked about a job opening Imani was considering. We talked about a documentary I had watched the week before. We talked about everything that did not have anything to do with the people who had spent 34 years making me feel small. Driving back down the mountain in the late afternoon, with the trees blurring past the windows and the sun turning everything gold, I had a strange thought. I thought, this is what it feels like to own something. Not just a car, something larger than a car, a life, the whole shape of it, the thing you fill with the choices that are actually yours. I cried a little, gently, driving down that mountain. Imani saw it and did not say anything. She just turned up the music and kept her hand near mine on the console. That, I realized, was friendship. That, I realized, was what love had always been supposed to feel like. I had just been looking for it in the wrong rooms. 2 weeks after the demand letter went out, my mother responded. Not to the letter, exactly. She responded by showing up at my front door on a Tuesday evening with a casserole dish in her hands and a soft, contrite expression on her face. She had not called first. She had assumed I would open the door because she was on the other side of it. That had always been enough. I saw her through the peephole. I did not open the door. I called through it instead. I said, "Mom, you cannot come in. I told you that. You can leave the casserole on the step if you want." She said, "Marlo, please. I just want to talk." I said, "You can talk to me on the phone. You can talk to me through email." You cannot stand on my porch and expect me to open the door because you decided you were ready." She was quiet for a moment. I waited. I held my breath. I had done this in my head dozens of times in the past 2 weeks, saying no to her through a closed door. I had practiced. I had even said the words out loud to Amani once, while she sat on my couch with a glass of wine and pretended to be my mother. We had laughed about it. It did not feel funny now. It felt heavy. It felt necessary. My mother said, "I do not understand what you want from me, Marlo." I said, "I want you to leave." She said, "This is ridiculous." I said, "That may be, but it is what I am asking you to do." She stood there for another minute. Then I heard her set the casserole dish down on the porch. I heard her footsteps go down the stairs. I heard her car door open and close. I heard her drive away. I waited 5 minutes after the sound of the engine faded. Then I opened the door, took the casserole inside, and put it in the freezer without opening the lid to see what was in it. I would deal with it later. I would maybe throw it out. I had not decided yet. The next morning, I sent her an email. It was a long one. I had been writing it in my head for 2 weeks. I had a copy of it that Adiz had reviewed because we had agreed that any major communication with my family during the next year should be documented and measured. In the email, I told my mother that I loved her. I told her that I did not want her out of my life forever. I told her that I needed a long pause, a stretch of time, perhaps 6 months, perhaps a year, during which I needed her to give me space. I told her that I needed her to acknowledge, in writing, that what she had done with the SUV was wrong. I told her that I needed her to understand that the pattern that led her to do it, the pattern that had run our family for 30 years, was a pattern I would no longer be participating in. I told her that I was not going to make a scene. I was not going to gossip. I was not going to bring it up at every holiday. I was simply going to live my life on my own terms, and she could be part of it in the ways I was comfortable with, or she could not be part of it at all. The choice was hers. I told her that I loved her. I ended with that. I meant it. That was the hardest part. I still loved her. I would probably always love her. Love was not the part of it that was up for renegotiation. Access was. She did not respond for 3 days. When she finally did, she sent a short email that said, "I will think about what you have said. I am hurt, but I will think about it." It was not an apology. It was not the kind of response I had hoped for, but it was the most honest thing she had written to me in years. She had not blamed me for it. She had not made it about Britain. She had said she was hurt, and she had said she would think. I took it as a starting point. I emailed her back a single line. I said, "Thank you, I will be here when you are ready." Britain, in the meantime, had begun a slower kind of work. She had sent me 3 letters by mail, real letters, written by hand, over the course of the month following the party. The first one was a kind of apology that was still mostly about her. She wrote about how embarrassed she had been at the party. She wrote about how Tate had questioned things. She wrote about the wedding planning being put on hold. It was not really about me, but I read it all the way through. The second letter was better. She wrote about a memory I had not thought about in years. She wrote about a time when I had been 13 and she had been 8, and she had been scared of thunderstorms, and I had let her sleep in my bed during a storm that lasted most of the night, and I had told her that thunder was just clouds bumping into each other, and that it could not hurt her. She wrote that she had thought about that memory a lot recently. She wrote that I had been her sister, long before our mother had taught us that we were rivals. The third letter was the best. She did not write about herself at all. She wrote a real apology. She wrote about the bike. She wrote about the laptop. She wrote about Connor. She wrote about the SUV. She listed each of these things by name, like she had been making a list, like she had been doing some kind of inventory. She did not ask me to forgive her in the letter. She wrote, "I do not know if you ever will be able to. I would understand if you cannot. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what you gave up. I see what was taken. I am 30 years late, but I see it." I read that letter 3 times. I cried the third time. I wrote her back a short note. I said, "Britain, thank you for the letter. I am not ready to talk in person yet, but I want you to know I read it. I want you to know I am proud of you for writing it." We did not see each other for the rest of the summer. We did not see each other in the fall either. She sent me a card on my birthday in October. I sent her a card on hers in November. We were communicating like pen pals, which sounds slow, but which felt, after years of being weaponized against each other like the only honest pace. Gran kept calling every evening. We had a standing call now, 6 in the evening, 20 minutes long. She told me her stories. I told her my stories. She finished her memoir of the woman from West Virginia and moved on to a book about the history of the textile industry in North Carolina. I told her about a little girl at the clinic who had said her first sentence after 3 years of work. We celebrated each other in small daily ways. It became the most precious 20 minutes of my day. Late October, I drove the SUV to Charlotte for lunch with Adiz, my former lawyer. We ate near her office. She said my case reminded her of her family and taught her about possibilities. She praised me for breaking a lifelong pattern of giving in, noting I only succeeded because I was ready to ask for help. Driving home, I felt I was finally becoming someone I liked. Early December, Gran invited me to Magnolia Ridge. I brought pastries she liked and simple flowers. She greeted me warmly. Over tea, she retrieved a manila envelope from her desk. She explained she updated her will to avoid surprises. She divided her savings equally among Dorian, Britton, and me, plus an extra sum for me to repay the family for using me for money. She also secured the SUV gift in writing. I protested, but she insisted she was just organizing her affairs to prevent my mother from making unfair decisions after her death. She gave me a sealed letter to open only after her death, ensuring I would have it immediately. I worried, but she reassured me she was just finishing her business at 82 years old. I kept the letter safely in my closet, hoping not to open it for a long time. That winter, my family changed. My father began calling me twice a week just to chat. My mother emailed bi-weekly, eventually sending an unqualified apology for her past actions. After a week, I replied with love and suggested a short phone call to start rebuilding our relationship. We had that phone call. It was not magical. There were awkward silences. There were small moments where her old patterns tried to come back. I gently redirected them. She let me. That was the new part. She let me. Britton and I had our first in-person meeting in February of this year. We met at a quiet coffee shop in downtown Asheville. She brought me a small wrapped gift, a framed photograph she had found of the two of us as little girls, sitting on a porch swing in Tennessee, my arm around her shoulders. I had not seen the photograph in 20 years. We looked happy in it. We had been happy once. That was the thing I had forgotten in all the years of being the older sister of a younger one who took my things. We had been happy once before our mother taught us not to be. We talked for 2 hours that day. She told me she had postponed the wedding. She and Tate were rebuilding some things. She told me she had started therapy. She told me she was learning, for the first time in her life, the difference between wanting something and being entitled to it. I drove home from that coffee shop in the SUV with the heated seats, the SUV my grandmother had bought for me in the summer of 2025. The SUV that had cost me far more than $38,000 in everything it had forced me to face. I drove home, and I thought about the journey from the empty driveway in June to the porch swing photograph in February. And I thought about all the people who never get the chance to make that journey, because they never quite work up the courage to say no to the people they love. I want to say this to whoever is watching, to whoever has sat with me through all of this. If you have a family that has taught you that love means handing yourself over piece by piece, please hear me when I tell you that love is not that. Love is not the relentless erosion of your own life for the comfort of someone else. Love is not the kind of generosity that leaves you with nothing. Love asks, love returns, love says thank you. Love does not slip into your house with a spare key and take the keys off your dresser. Boundaries are not walls. Boundaries are the shape of you. When you let people take your boundaries apart, you become shapeless. You become something easy to use. You can be the most generous person in every room and still have boundaries. You can love your family deeply and still tell them, no, you may not have this thing that is mine. Both of those can be true. They have to be true. Otherwise, the love is not really love. It is just access. I am 34 years old. I drive a midnight blue SUV that I park in my own driveway every night with the keys on my own dresser, behind a door with a lock I had changed by a man with a small dog in his van. I love my grandmother more than I can say. I am learning to love my mother again, slowly, on terms I can live with. I am learning to love my sister as a sister, not as a competitor in a game I did not sign up to play. I am building something, finally. A life that is shaped like me, instead of shaped like the empty space my family left for me to fit into. If this story meant something to you, I would love to hear from you. Please give this video a like if it touched you, subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more stories like this one, and share your own experiences in the comments. I read them. I learned from them. We are all walking this same path together, even when it feels like we are walking it alone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And please, whatever you do, keep your own keys on your own dresser. They were always meant to be yours.